Ever pondered about the implications of a foreign power ruling over your land for centuries? Imagine the transformation, the blending of cultures, the strife, and the eventual emergence of a new identity. The British colonization of India wasn't just a historical event. It was a period that reshaped the fabric of an entire subcontinent. The influence was profound, permeating every aspect of Indian life. So, let's explore this significant chapter of history. Today, we dive into the historical depths of the British colonization of India. Our tale begins in the early 1600s, when the British East India Company set foot on Indian soil. This marked the dawn of a new era for India, an era that would reshape its destiny and create a deep impact on its culture, economy, and politics. The British East India Company, a private enterprise, was the spearhead of this change. In the beginning, the company was just one of many global trading entities that came to India. They were drawn by the allure of India's exotic spices, precious gems, and rich textiles. The Portuguese, the Dutch, and the French were all vying for a piece of this lucrative trade pie. But the British had an edge granted by none other than Queen Elizabeth I herself. In the year 1600, Queen Elizabeth I issued a royal charter to the British East India Company. This charter granted the company exclusive rights to trade with the East Indies, a term that, in those days, referred to most of Asia, including India. The charter was a game changer. It gave the British East India Company the backing it needed to establish a firm foothold in India. The company started by setting up trading posts along the coast. They built factories where Indian goods were stored before being shipped to Britain. These factories soon became fortified strongholds, providing the British with a military presence in India. And with this military presence, the British East India Company began to wield considerable influence over the local rulers. In return for protection, the rulers granted the company special privileges, including the right to collect taxes. Over time, these privileges gave the company control over large swathes of Indian territory. The British East India Company had transitioned from a trading entity to a political power. And thus, the seeds of British colonization were sown in India. The British East India Company had laid the groundwork for what would eventually become the British Raj, a period of direct British rule that would last for nearly 2 centuries. But that's a story for the next scene. Fast forward to the mid-1700s, the British East India Company had started to spread its roots. The company, initially just a trading entity, had begun to set its footprints deeper into the Indian subcontinent. But how did this commercial entity transform into a political power? 2 significant battles marked this shift: the Battle of Plassey in 1757 and the Battle of Buxar in 1764. The Battle of Plassey was a game changer. This was when the British, under the command of Robert Clive, defeated the Nawab of Bengal and his French allies. This victory not only gave the British control over Bengal, one of the richest provinces, but also marked the beginning of their political influence in India. Just 7 years later, the Battle of Buxar further solidified the British control. This time, they defeated the combined forces of the Mughal Emperor, the Nawab of Awadh, and the Nawab of Bengal. This victory placed the British at the helm of political power in the northern and eastern provinces of India. Now, let's talk about the doctrine of lapse. Introduced by Lord Dalhousie in 1856, this policy played a crucial role in the British expansion. According to this doctrine, any Indian princely state under the direct influence of the British East India Company as a vassal or tributary would automatically be annexed if the ruler was either manifestly incompetent or died without a male heir. This clever yet insidious policy led to the annexation of several states, further expanding the British territory in India. The consequences of this policy were far-reaching. It not only led to widespread discontent among the princely states, but also sowed the seeds of the revolt of 1857, which we would discuss in the next segment. The British had now established themselves as a political power in India. Their influence, which began as a mere trading interest, had now spread across the length and breadth of the Indian subcontinent. By the 19th century, the British Crown took over the reins from the East India Company. This marked a significant shift in the tone and trajectory of British rule in India. The Crown, unlike the Company, was not solely interested in economic exploitation. They sought to reshape Indian society in their own image. One of the most profound ways they did this was through the introduction of the British educational system. English was declared the official language of instruction, supplanting the traditional languages of Sanskrit and Persian. British literature and philosophy were introduced, and Indians were taught about British history and culture. This was a calculated move to create a class of Indians who were Indian in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect, as famously stated by Lord Macaulay. The British also made significant infrastructural developments. They introduced railways, which revolutionized transportation in India. The first railway line, constructed in the mid-19th century, connected Bombay to Thane. By the end of the century, India had a vast network of railways, making it easier to transport goods and people across the vast subcontinent. The post and telegraph services were another significant addition. These services not only improved communication across India, but also tightened the British administrative grip on the country. The socio-economic changes brought about during this period were immense. The British introduced new land revenue systems, which had a profound impact on agriculture and rural society. They also facilitated the growth of new Indian industries, such as the jute and cotton industries. However, these changes often served British economic interests more than those of the Indian people. These transformations, though significant, came with a heavy price. The British rule, while introducing modern elements to Indian society, also led to the exploitation and marginalization of many sections of the Indian populace. India was now under the direct rule of the British Crown. This period marked the zenith of British colonization, a time when the sun never set on the British Empire, and India was its most prized possession. Yet, the spirit of freedom was not to be quenched. As the British grip tightened, the flame of rebellion started to flicker across the subcontinent. This uprising against colonial rule took a significant form with the Indian Rebellion of 1857, often referred to as the First War of Indian Independence. Initially sparked by sepoys, Indian soldiers in the British Army, the rebellion quickly spread, engulfing large swathes of northern and central India. This was not just a military revolt, it was an emphatic statement from a people who yearned for freedom from foreign rule. Although the rebellion was eventually suppressed, it marked a significant shift in the way India would resist British rule. In the aftermath of the rebellion, the Indian National Congress was formed in 1885. This political party played a pivotal role in shaping India's struggle for independence. Through peaceful protests, civil disobedience and negotiations, the Congress sought to challenge and eventually end British rule. The struggle for independence was not a single, unified movement, but rather a series of protests and revolts, each contributing to the overall push for freedom. The non-cooperation movement, the civil disobedience movement, and the Quit India movement were all significant chapters in this long and arduous fight. Each of these movements, in their own unique ways, challenged the British authority and rallied the masses towards the cause of independence. They brought together people from all walks of life, transcending barriers of caste, religion, and region. The fight was not only against colonial rule, but also for a vision of an inclusive and democratic India. The struggle for independence was a testament to the resilience, unity, and indomitable spirit of the Indian people. It was a fight that was fueled by the dream of self-rule, of a nation free from the shackles of colonialism. The fight for freedom was on, and India was ready to take charge of its destiny. After decades of struggle and sacrifice, the dawn of independence was finally in sight. As the world was embroiled in the Second World War, Britain was stretched thin. Back in India, the war sparked a new urgency for freedom. The Quit India movement of 1942, led by Mahatma Gandhi, was a call for the British to leave India immediately. It was a movement that saw widespread participation from all sections of society, further weakening the grip of the British. Meanwhile, the war had severely drained Britain economically and militarily. The British government, under Prime Minister Clement Attlee, began to realize that maintaining control over India was no longer feasible. The stage was set for a change. In 1947, Lord Louis Mountbatten was appointed the last Viceroy of India, with the specific task of overseeing the transfer of power to the Indians. The process, while fraught with challenges, moved swiftly. Mountbatten advanced the date of independence from June 1948 to August 1947, a decision that was met with widespread relief. In the early hours of August 15, 1947, the Union Jack was lowered for the last time, and the Indian tricolour was hoisted. The long night of colonial rule had ended, and the dawn of independence had arrived. On August 15, 1947, India emerged as a free nation, ending centuries of British rule. The British colonization of India was a significant chapter in world history. It began with a seemingly innocent trade relationship, but quickly evolved into a full-fledged invasion. The dawn of British rule saw the expansion and consolidation of their power across the subcontinent, leading to the peak of colonization. However, this was also a time of great resistance. The struggle for independence was marked by inspiring courage and indomitable spirit, ultimately leading to the end of British rule. This period has left an indelible imprint on India. The English language, the legal and educational systems, and the railway network are all legacies of the British Raj. However, the scars of colonization, the divide and rule policy, and the economic exploitation still influence India today. Reflecting on these aspects of our history allows us to understand our present better and to strive for a more equitable future. Remember, history is not just about the past. It shapes our present and guides our future.